Tonight, in this deep dive, we are exploring the invisible currency of our relationships, the tiny fleeting moments that decide whether we feel deeply connected to the people in our lives or just, quietly alone in the same room.
Yeah, that really is the perfect way to frame it.
I want you to imagine a scene. You are sitting on the couch after a long day.
Right.
The television is just kind of murmuring in the background. You are scrolling on your phone, and you see a funny video or maybe an article that genuinely surprises you.
Something that just catches your attention for a second.
Exactly. So you turn to your partner sitting right next to you, and you say, "Oh, wow, look at this." Or maybe you text it to your best friend.
Yeah.
And then, nothing.
Nothing up.
Your partner doesn't even look up from their laptop. They just keep typing and mutter, "Oh, cool." Or your friend texts back a single gray thumbs up emoji like 3 hours later.
Which is brutal.
It is. We all know the exact physical sensation that follows that moment. It is this tiny, quiet deflation right in the center of your chest.
A microscopic spike of cortisol.
Right. You feel a little silly, you pull your phone back, you look at the TV, and the room suddenly feels just a fraction of a degree colder.
It is a profound starting point. Because what you are describing there isn't just a minor social annoyance. From a neurobiological standpoint, your brain is actually processing a moment of emotional abandonment.
Wow. Emotional abandonment. That sounds so intense for just a missed text message.
It does, but so often we look at the health of a relationship by measuring the big loud things, right? The luxury vacations, the anniversary dinners, or the dramatic shouting arguments.
Like the things you'd see in a movie.
Exactly. But the architecture of human connection isn't built from those rare events. It is built in the mundane. It is built in that exact moment on the couch.
Which brings us to the mission of this deep dive. We're taking a stack of behavioral science, specifically some landmark relationship research from the Gottman Institute, the psychological models of intimacy from Rees and Shaver, and we're even drawing insights from a narrative thriller we read this week, a book called The Bone Harvest.
Yeah, which is fascinating.
It is. We are using all of this to unpack the architecture of emotional intimacy. We want to look at what is actually happening in those tiny, seemingly insignificant Tuesday night moments.
But before we get into the mechanisms of the human brain, we really need to establish the guiding philosophy for you, the listener.
Absolutely.
We aren't here to judge your past relationship mistakes. We aren't handing you a checklist of things to, fix about yourself or your partner. We are looking at human connection strictly through a lens of curiosity.
Because understanding is the antidote to shame.
Perfectly said. If you find yourself recognizing your own less-than-stellar moments in this conversation, remember, you aren't broken. Your relationships aren't broken just because they experience friction. You are simply human, operating a very complex nervous system in a very distracted world.
Curiosity over judgment. I want to hold on to that because I actually want to push back a little on the couch scenario we just opened with.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let me play devil's advocate for the person listening who is thinking, come on, it's just a meme, it's just a text message. If I get upset because my partner didn't laugh at a TikTok video while they were trying to finish an email for work, aren't I just being needy?
Right?
Like, aren't we demanding too much constant validation from people?
And that is the exact trap we fall into. We gaslight ourselves out of the feeling. We tell ourselves we're just being too sensitive.
Yeah, you feel needy.
But we have to look at how the mammalian brain is wired. We are deeply social species, and our physical survival historically depended entirely on our standing within the tribe.
So it's biological.
Completely. When you reach out to share a moment of amusement, your nervous system is essentially sending out a low-level ping, like a sonar pulse, checking the perimeter for safety and connection.
Oh, I like that, a sonar pulse.
And when that ping hits a wall of silence or just a distracted cool, your amygdala, which is the threat detection center of your brain, registers a tiny alarm.
It says the connection is weak.
Yes. It says you are slightly exposed. It is a micro-rejection.
It feels like standing in a park and gently underhand tossing a tennis ball to someone. You aren't throwing it hard, you just toss it. And they just stand there, arms at their sides, and let the ball hit their chest, drop to the grass, and just roll past it.
Right. They don't even try to catch it.
And you aren't going to scream at them for dropping it. I mean, it is just a ball. But the next time you hold that ball, you are definitely going to hesitate before you toss it again. You might just put it in your pocket and walk home.
The hesitation is the key there. You are testing the waters of responsiveness. When the ball rolls away, a tiny layer of frost forms on the interaction.
Yeah.
And if we look at the research, specifically the massive longitudinal studies developed by Doctors John and Julie Gottman, we actually have a clear, grounded name for this abstract feeling. They call these gentle tosses of the ball bids for connection.
Bids for connection. I love naming things. It takes this invisible, frustrating thing and makes it tangible.
It really does.
So when I show my partner a ridiculous video of a dog, I am not just being annoying. I am actively bidding for their emotional presence.
Precisely. A bid is any attempt from one person to another for attention, affirmation, affection, or, any other positive connection.
It's just an invitation to engage.
Exactly. The Gottmans built this apartment laboratory. It is often referred to as the Love Lab, where they observed couples interacting over weekends. They tracked everything from heart rate to facial microexpressions.
Just to see how they handle the mundane stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what their data definitively proved is that the way couples respond to each other's tiny, everyday bids strongly correlates with relationship survival. In fact, it is the single most predictive metric of whether a relationship will thrive long-term or wither and die.
Wow. That puts a lot of weight on a Tuesday night in the living room.
It does.
But a bid isn't just holding up a phone, right? The research categorizes these, and I think we need to walk through them slowly so you, listening, can start to identify your own primary bidding style.
Yeah, and maybe recognize the bids of the people around you, too. The first category the Gottmans identified is affection-based bids.
Okay, now, obviously this includes asking, hey, can I have a hug? But it's usually much quieter than that, isn't it?
Much quieter.
It is the casual reach. It is walking past your partner in a narrow kitchen and just letting your hand trail across their back.
Right.
Or sitting on the couch and just shifting your weight so your knee is touching their leg.
Yes. It is a physical request for grounding. When someone makes an affection-based bid, they are often seeking neurochemical regulation.
Meaning what, exactly?
Well, physical touch releases oxytocin, which lowers cortisol.
Yeah.
So when your partner reaches out to hold your hand while you were driving, they might be stressed, and they are subconsciously asking your nervous system to help co-regulate theirs.
Oh, wow. That reframes everything. It is not just being clingy. It is a biological request for regulation.
Exactly.
Okay, what about the second category? The research calls these requests for support.
These can be practical or emotional, and they are highly vulnerable because asking for support requires admitting a deficit. It is coming home, dropping your bags on the counter, and letting out a really heavy, exaggerated sigh.
Oh, the heavy sigh. I know the heavy sigh well.
We all do.
And sometimes it is infuriating because it feels passive-aggressive. Like,
Yeah.
why not just say, I had a bad day, can we talk?
Because direct vulnerability is terrifying for a lot of people. Direct requests carry the risk of direct, undeniable rejection.
Right.
If I say, I am sad, please hold me, and you say, I'm busy, that is a devastating blow to my ego. But if I just sigh heavily and you ignore me, I can protect my ego by telling myself, well, they just didn't hear me.
Oh, that makes so much human sense. The indirect bid is a protective shield.
Yes, it is a way to test the water safely.
And a support bid could also be practical, right? Like, can you help me format this terrifying email to my boss? You are asking them to step into the trenches with you, even just for 5 minutes.
Right. Then we have the third category, which is arguably the most common in the digital age. Playful or humorous bids.
This is the meme economy of modern relationships.
It really is.
The inside jokes, the light teasing, and honestly, I think we heavily discount these. We just treat humor as trivial filler.
We do, but evolutionary psychology tells us that play is a crucial metric of safety. Mammals only play when they feel entirely safe from predators.
Yeah, that is so true.
When your partner sends you a ridiculous meme or lightly nudges you and makes a joke about the terrible movie you're watching, it is a very safe, low-stakes way of asking, are we good?
Are we still on the same wavelength?
Exactly. Is this environment still safe?
Are we still safe?
Yeah.
That is a really heavy question disguised as a joke.
Mm-hmm.
Moving to the fourth flavor, we have physical or romantic bids. Now, this goes beyond simple affection. This is flirtatious touch, lingering eye contact, the expression of physical desire.
And this is where a missed bid can cause the deepest, most immediate relational damage, because the vulnerability here is at its absolute peak.
Right, because rejection here hurts the most.
A rejection of a romantic bid often feels like a rejection of the core self.
And finally, there are attention-seeking bids.
This is the classic, look at that weird bird outside. Or listen to this strange dream I had last night. Or simply sharing a random thought about an article you read.
I'm listening to you outline these, the physical touch, the heavy sigh, the meme, the flirtation, the comment about the bird. And it strikes me that they look completely different on the surface.
They do.
But if we pull back, if we look beneath the surface behavior, what is the actual mechanism at work here?
If we connect all of this to the bigger picture, the core mechanism inside every single one of those bids is a singular unspoken question. Do I matter to you? Will you show up for me emotionally?
Wow.
That is what you are actually asking when you point out the bird out the window. You do not actually care about the bird.
Right.
You care about whether your partner will turn their head, join you in your reality, and confirm that your shared world exists.
That is a staggering realization. It is not about the content of the video or the bird or the meme. It is a reality check. I am asking you to step into my reality for 3 seconds.
Yes.
And if you refuse, my brain interprets that as, I am alone here.
Exactly. Which brings us to the behavioral science of how we actually respond to these bids. Because once that ball is tossed in the air, the entire future of the interaction depends on how the receiver reacts.
Okay, so what are the options?
The Gottman research outlines 3 primary physiological and behavioral responses.
Let's break these down and let's use a hypothetical couple. We'll call them Sarah and John. Let's say Sarah's looking out the window, sees something, and says, John, look at how crazy the clouds look right now.
Okay, the first response, and the absolute goal of any healthy relationship, is turning toward. This means John acknowledges the bid and responds positively.
Now wait, does John have to drop his laptop, run to the window, wrap his arms around her, and have a 10-minute conversation about meteorology?
Not at all. That is a common misconception that exhausts people. Turning toward can be incredibly brief.
How brief?
John can keep typing, but simply angle his body slightly toward her, glance at the window for 1 second and say, oh, wow, yeah, looks like a storm is coming. That is it.
Oh, so it's really just acknowledging it.
He has engaged with the bid. He caught the ball and tossed it back. He validated her reality.
Okay. The second response is turning away.
Turning away is ignoring or failing to notice the bid entirely. Sarah says, look at the clouds. John says nothing. He just keeps staring at his screen.
Or maybe he just mutters an absent, but his eyes never leave the monitor.
Exactly.
This is the drop ball. And I want to pause here because I know people listening are thinking, I do this all the time, but I don't mean anything by it. I am just hyper-focused on my work.
And that is a vital point. Turning away is very often not malicious. It happens due to distraction, stress, or a sheer lack of situational awareness.
But does that matter to the other person?
Here is the terrifying part of the research. The intent behind the turning away doesn't matter to the bidder's nervous system.
Oh.
Even if John is just trying to meet a critical work deadline and genuinely didn't hear her, Sarah's brain still registers the exact same micro-rejection. To her amygdala, she is alone in the room.
That is brutal.
Yep.
It is a collision of realities. And then there's the third response, which is turning against.
Turning against is reacting to the bid with hostility, irritation, sarcasm, or criticism.
So Sarah says, look at the clouds.
And John snaps, can't you see? I'm trying to finish this report. Why are you interrupting me about the weather?
Yikes. He didn't just drop the ball. He pulled out a baseball bat and smashed it back into her face. He is actively punishing her for attempting to connect.
Yes. And while turning away slowly starves a relationship of oxygen, turning against actively poisons it. It creates an environment of fear.
Because Sarah's brain learns very quickly that reaching out is dangerous.
Exactly, so she will stop doing it entirely.
So we know that turning toward is the mechanism that builds the relationship. But I want to dig into the how. How does acknowledging a comment about a cloud actually create intimacy?
It's a great question.
Because the word intimacy carries a lot of cultural baggage. We think of intimacy as staring into each other's eyes over candlelight and sharing our deepest, darkest childhood traumas.
That is the Hollywood definition of intimacy, and it is actually highly misleading. To understand the true mechanics of how these tiny, seemingly mundane moments build massive emotional intimacy over time, we have to look at the intimacy process model.
Okay, who developed that?
It was developed by psychological researchers Harry Rees and Philip Shaver. They proposed that true intimacy is a 2-step sequence. Step 1 is the personal self-disclosure, which is the bid, Sarah sharing her observation.
And step 2?
Step 2 is the vital mechanism, Perceived Partner Responsiveness, or PPR.
Perceived partner responsiveness. Let's unpack the components of this because the psychological data here is incredibly precise.
It really is.
According to Rees and Shaver, For a human being to actually feel intimacy, their nervous system must perceive three distinct things from their partner's response. First, the listener must feel understood.
Right.
You need to believe that your partner is accurately perceiving your core characteristics. John doesn't just see the cloud. He understands why Sarah, who loves painting or who is anxious about driving in the rain, is pointing it out.
Exactly. It is the feeling of they see the world through my lens for a brief moment.
Second, you must feel validated. And this is crucial because validation is not the same as agreement.
That distinction is paramount. You can think Sarah is overreacting to the clouds, but validation means you respect her personal experience as real and acceptable.
You aren't judging her for her thoughts.
No, you are signaling your reality is safe with me, even if I don't share it.
And third, you must feel cared for. You need to believe that your partner is actively motivated to help fulfill your psychological needs. They are acting as a safe harbor.
Understood, validated, cared for. When those three elements are present in a response, the parasympathetic nervous system engages. Heart rate slows, muscles relax.
The brain releases a cascade of bonding hormones.
Yes, that physiological state of safety is intimacy.
I'm looking at this sequence, and the science confirms something so profound about human connection. Intimacy isn't just about what you disclose. It is almost entirely dependent on how the other person catches what you disclose.
The responsiveness is the active ingredient.
Right. Think about it. You could sit down and tell someone the most painful, vulnerable story of your entire life. You could disclose your deepest trauma. But if they respond by looking at their watch and saying, wow, that sucks, you do not feel intimate with them. In fact, you feel more alienated and lonely than if you had never spoken at all.
Absolutely.
The science provides confirmation for what we have all felt in our bones. It is the catch, not the throw.
It is the catch. And the data shows that this sequence disclosure followed by high perceived partner responsiveness is the bedrock of relationship welfare.
Without it, relationships just fail.
Without it, even couples who have massive, fiery, passionate chemistry at the beginning of a relationship will slowly erode into dissatisfaction, loneliness, and eventually separation.
I want to transition into how this actually plays out in the real world. Because nobody is walking around their living room thinking, I am now going to execute a highly responsive validation maneuver to engage her parasympathetic nervous system.
No, we just react. We are tired, we are hungry, we are distracted.
Exactly. There is a brilliant framework in the research called Active Constructive Responding that charts exactly how these reactions look in real life. It basically plots our conversational responses on a matrix.
Yes, this framework, popularized by researcher Shelley Gable, is incredibly revealing. It specifically looks at how we respond when someone shares a positive bid, a piece of good news, a success, or a moment of joy.
And isn't that fascinating? How we handle our partner's joy is actually more predictive of relationship health than how we handle their grief.
It is counterintuitive, but yes. And the matrix identifies 4 quiet patterns people fall into.
Let's bring Sarah and John back to illustrate this. Let's say Sarah comes home from work, absolutely glowing, and says, John, I just got the promotion I've been working toward for 6 months.
Okay, a huge positive bid.
Huge. If John is operating in the passive destructive quadrant, he essentially changes the subject entirely. He might say, did you see where I put the car keys? Or, man, my boss was a nightmare today.
It is conversational whiplash. The bid is completely ignored and the focus is hijacked.
And the psychological effect on Sarah is instant deflation. She is left holding this massive balloon of joy, and John just walked out of the room without looking at it. It leaves the bitter feeling entirely invisible.
Then there is the active destructive response. This one is insidious. This is poking holes in the joy.
So Sarah says, I got the promotion. And John says, are you sure you can handle that? It sounds really stressful.
Right. He says, you're going to be working late all the time now, and you know how burned out you got last year. Is the pay even worth the tax bracket jump?
He actively deflates the balloon. He finds the negative.
And what's fascinating is that people who use the active destructive response often genuinely believe they are being helpful.
Oh, definitely. They think they are being realistic.
Yes, or protecting their partner from future disappointment. But relationally, it is devastating. It teaches the partner that sharing success is a punishable offense that will only result in anxiety.
I have to admit, hearing that makes me wince, because I know I've done that. I thought I was being a grounded, pragmatic partner, but really I was just throwing a wet blanket on their fire.
We all do it from time to time.
Okay, the third pattern is the passive constructive response. This is the distracted, low-energy response. Sarah says, I got the promotion. John doesn't look up from his phone. He just says, oh, cool, babe. Good for you. You deserve it.
It's the thumbs up emoji in verbal form.
Ex-
It is technically positive, the words are supportive, but the nonverbal communication, the tone, the energy, it completely lacks the engagement necessary to generate perceived partner responsiveness.
So Sarah does not feel understood, validated, or cared for.
No, she just feels dismissed. It is a massive missed opportunity for connection.
Which brings us to the holy grail, active constructive responding. This is genuine, energetic engagement.
Yes.
Sarah says, I got the promotion. John puts the phone face down. He turns to her. He smiles.
Sarah, that is incredible news. I know how hard you worked on that presentation. How do you feel? Tell me what your boss said when they told you.
He turns toward the bid. He amplifies the joy. And crucially, he asks questions to deepen the connection. He acts as a magnifying glass for her positive experience.
It's a totally different energy.
Now, I want you, the listener, to take this matrix and run it over a timeline of 5, 10, or 20 years. What happens to a human brain when its bids for connection are consistently, day after day, met with the passive or destructive patterns? It results in a psychological phenomenon called emotional erosion.
Emotional erosion. That sounds like water slowly, imperceptibly wearing away a stone cliff.
That is exactly what it is. The breakdown of a long-term relationship is rarely a sudden explosion. It is not usually the dramatic affair or the screaming match that kills the intimacy. It is a slow, quiet resignation.
Right. If you send your partner a funny text and they give you a lull, and you tell them a story and they change the subject and you reach for their hand and they adjust their posture, eventually the nervous system adapts.
It protects itself from the continuous micro-rejections.
Exactly. The bids simply stop. You stop tossing the ball because you are exhausted from watching it roll away.
And that silence. When a couple is sitting in a room and neither of them is reaching out, that silence is the sound of a relationship actively dying.
I am listening to you explain emotional erosion, and honestly, it is making my chest tight. I imagine a listener sitting in their car right now, tallying up how many times they stared at their laptop yesterday while their partner was talking, and feeling a rising sense of panic.
Like, is the damage already done? Am I the villain in my own home?
But here is where we need to introduce crucial nuance. Because why does this actually happen? Most people love their partners. Most people desperately want to be good friends, good spouses, good parents.
Right. Why do we consistently miss these bids if we love the person making them?
The research by Reese and Gable points out a vital distinction between our intentions and our actual responsiveness. They identified 4 distinct reasons why a bid fails. The blind spots of responsiveness. And I want to go through these carefully because this is where the empathy begins.
This is where we start to dismantle the blame. A bid can fail for 4 very human reasons. Number 1, the partner simply doesn't recognize the need.
So Sarah makes that heavy sigh, hoping John will ask what's wrong. But John isn't an expert in nonverbal cues. He literally just thinks she is breathing heavily because she carried the groceries up the stairs.
He missed the bid because it was invisible to him.
Yes. Number 2, the partner recognizes the need, but lacks the intention or bandwidth to respond. John hears the sigh. He knows Sarah is stressed about her mother, but John just got off a 12-hour shift, his back aches, and he is teetering on the edge of a panic attack himself.
He is just too emotionally exhausted to open that door in that exact moment.
Exactly. Number 3, the partner has the intention, but lacks the ability or skill to enact the proper response. John wants to comfort Sarah. He loves her, but he feels awkward.
He doesn't know the right psychological words to validate her feelings.
So he panics, tries to offer a clumsy logistical solution, or just stays silent out of fear of saying the wrong thing.
And number 4, which is fascinating, the actor, the one making the bid, fails to recognize the response as supportive. John might try to comfort Sarah by saying, let me call your boss and sort this out for you, thinking he's being a protective hero. But Sarah just wanted to vent and feel heard. So she perceives his response as a failure and feels dismissed, even though his intent was fierce love and support.
It is a profoundly complex translation process. We are essentially 2 different operating systems trying to share source code.
And to really make this universal, to understand why we so often lack the bandwidth or ability to respond in those critical moments, we need to look at what is happening inside our own minds.
Right.
This is where that narrative parallel from the thriller we read, The Bone Harvest, becomes such a brilliant illustration.
Yes. It's funny, as you explain this emotional bandwidth deficit, I couldn't stop thinking about Detective Luke from the book.
For the listener who hasn't read it, The Bone Harvest by Jones is a very dark, tense narrative thriller. Luke is a detective who is entirely consumed by unresolved trauma, specifically the disappearance of his sister Lily.
He is carrying this massive, crushing psychological burden, which is suddenly compounded when he receives a chilling letter from a serial killer claiming responsibility.
Right, so Luke is a character operating under a state of immense chronic cognitive and emotional load. His nervous system is constantly in fight or flight.
Exactly. And what I found brilliant is that the author doesn't just show Luke at work. The author explicitly uses this dynamic to show the relational fallout of that mental load.
Yeah, in Chapter 3, there is a stark juxtaposition. You have Luke and his colleague Riley, who are carrying the horrific gravity of these missing persons cases. And the text shows how this heavy emotional baggage, this relentless work obligation, completely strains their personal lives.
They have no capacity for meaningful relationships outside the precinct.
Because the trauma monopolizes their cognitive bandwidth. The brain literally does not have the processing power left to notice a subtle bid for connection when it is devoting 90% of its resources to surviving a perceived existential threat.
And Luke is a good person. He is deeply protective. He exhibits moral leadership. He desperately wants to do the right thing. He is not a malicious partner.
Not at all.
But his fixation on the past, his obsessive search for closure, distorts his reality. It leaves him with absolutely nothing left in the tank for the people standing right in front of him. He is unintentionally turning away from the living because he is entirely consumed by looking at ghosts.
And we have to pull this universal truth out of the fiction and apply it to our own lives. While you, driving your car right now, are probably not a detective hunting a serial killer, we all have our own versions of the bone harvest.
Yeah, we absolutely do.
We all carry invisible psychological burdens that act as cognitive malware, running in the background and draining our battery.
Let's ground that. What does a modern bone harvest look like for the average person?
It looks like chronic, low-grade work stress. It looks like the financial worries that jolt you awake at 3 in the morning. It looks like carrying the invisible mental load of a household, remembering the grocery list, the doctor's appointments, the school forms.
Or it looks like unresolved childhood trauma or clinical anxiety, or frankly, just the exhausting, relentless pace of the modern news cycle and digital algorithms.
These psychological burdens hijack our attention. They consume our bandwidth. And when our bandwidth is at 0, we lose the capacity to notice the gentle toss of the ball.
We unintentionally turn away from our partner's bids, not because we don't love them, but because our internal system is desperately overloaded.
I think this brings us to the absolute pivot point of this entire conversation. If you take nothing else away from this hour, let it be this. We have to deliberately, consciously steer this conversation away from blame and shame.
Yes, we must reframe this entirely. Missing a bid or having your bid missed is not a fatal flaw.
It is not evidence that you are fundamentally unlovable.
And it is not evidence that your partner is a narcissistic monster who doesn't care about you. It is a deeply human experience, born out of the agonizing friction between our good intentions and our distracted, exhausted realities.
You are not broken. Your partner is not broken.
If the Wi-Fi signal between your phone and your laptop drops, you don't take a hammer and smash the devices to pieces. You don't scream at the router that it's a terrible, unloving piece of hardware.
Right, you simply recognize, oh, the connection is blocked. You check the cables, you look for interference, you reset the system.
It is about practicing emotional attunement as a team. You are two people trying to keep a fragile signal strong in a world entirely built on interference. You are not interrogating a suspect, you are troubleshooting a connection.
That is the perfect analogy. The problem isn't the person. The problem is the block in the signal. So how do we reset the router? How do we navigate this without judgment?
Well, Dr. John Gottman provides a roadmap for this, an acronym called ATTUNE, and it is a practice for rebuilding that emotional attunement when the signal drops.
Let's walk through ATTUNE slowly, because these aren't just buzzwords. They require actual psychological heavy lifting.
The A stands for awareness of your partner's feelings. This is the foundational step. It means taking a breath, pulling your eyes away from the screen, and simply trying to notice what is happening with them, beyond your own internal noise.
It is observing their posture, their tone, the lines around their eyes.
The first T is turning toward your partner. We discussed this earlier. When you notice that bid, even if you are exhausted, making the micro choice to angle your body toward them, make eye contact, and engage.
It is overriding the inertia of exhaustion.
The second T is tolerance of other perspectives. This is where it gets difficult. You might not understand why your partner is having a meltdown over a seemingly minor scheduling conflict at work. It might seem irrational to you.
But tolerance means accepting that their emotional experience is different from yours, and that difference does not make their experience invalid.
Exactly. The you is understanding their position or beliefs. Moving beyond tolerance, you actively try to see the world through their specific lens for a moment. You ask questions to map out their emotional geography.
The N is the crucible, non-defensiveness. This is biologically terrifying.
It really is.
When your partner comes to you and says, "I feel like you haven't been listening to me lately," our immediate, instinctual, neurobiological response is self-protection. Our heart rate spikes, our face flushes, and we want to shout, "I have been working 60 hours a week to pay our mortgage. Give me a break."
Non-defensiveness means overriding that fight or flight response. It means taking a deep breath and holding space for their pain without immediately deploying your own excuses as a shield. It is saying, tell me more about why you feel unheard, even when your ego is screaming.
That feels almost impossible in the heat of the moment. But I see why it's necessary. If you throw up a shield, the ball just bounces off.
And finally, the E is empathy, feeling with them, not fixing it for them, just sitting next to them in the dark room.
Practicing the Attune framework isn't about being a perfect, enlightened robot. You will fail at this constantly. It's simply about setting a direction.
And to do this sustainably, we have to adopt a critical piece of advice from relationship expert Terry Gaspard. She highlights something essential. When you notice a chronic disconnect in your relationship, you must examine your own actions and adopt realistic expectations.
Drop the fixer mentality.
Exactly. Do not try to fix your partner. It is impossible, and frankly, it is unethical. You cannot mold another human being into a perfectly responsive vending machine that dispenses validation on command.
And do not play the blame game. No one wins the blame game. It just creates deeper trenches and more distance.
As we start to pull this idea upward, looking at the deeper layer beneath the research, we realize that bids for connection and perceived partner responsiveness are never just about the meme or the hug or the text message.
No, they are the surface ripples of a much deeper current. They are about our fundamental existential human need for interpersonal mindfulness and psychological safety.
Every time you successfully turn toward your partner's bid, you aren't just being polite. You are making a tiny, tangible deposit into an emotional bank account. You are building a massive reserve of trust, grace, and safety.
And you desperately need that reserve because life guarantees that dark, heavy seasons will arrive. You will face grief, like Detective Luke. You will face illness, financial collapse, or the slow, confusing friction of aging. That emotional reserve, built on 1,000 Tuesday nights in the kitchen, is the only thing that sustains the relationship through the winter.
It is the mirror of the self, isn't it? How we bid for connection, how we shrink when a bid is missed, how defensive we get when we are accused of turning away. It reflects our earliest childhood attachments. It touches our deepest, most primal fears of abandonment.
When we hold up our phone to show someone a video, we are acting out a deeply vulnerable human ritual. We are asking the universe, am I seen? Am I safe here? If I reach out in the dark, will a hand catch mine?
Yes. And understanding the biology and psychology of that interaction allows us to look at the people in our lives with so much more grace.
When they miss our bid, instead of spiraling into rejection, we can recognize their distracted, exhausted humanity. And when they make a clumsy, poorly timed bid toward us, we can recognize the vulnerable, terrified question hidden inside it. We can choose, in that microsecond, to turn toward them.
Let's just take a breath. We have covered a massive amount of ground today. From the neurobiology of the amygdala to the intimacy process model to the heavy burdens of the bone harvest. But the core of this is profoundly, quietly simple.
It is. I'm not going to introduce any new science here at the end. Just a gentle summary of the landscape we just walked through.
Every interaction you have today is an invitation. Every text message, every passing glance in the hallway, every random annoying comment about the weather, they are all tiny threads reaching out, looking for something to weave into.
I want to leave you with one final thought, something we haven't touched on yet, but that I want you to carry with you as you go back into your day or your evening. Think about the devices in our pockets. Our phones, our algorithms, our social media feeds. These technologies are exquisitely engineered to be the perfect, frictionless partner. They never turn away. They always respond instantly.
They feed us exactly what you want, constantly offering us algorithmic bids for connection that requires zero emotional risk to engage with.
We are training our nervous systems to prefer the if this conversation felt true for you today, if something in here landed, if it gave you a word for a feeling you've carried but couldn't name and made your own relationships make just a little more sense. We would love for you to subscribe to Leone Patterns so you never miss what we explore next.
Leave a comment wherever you are listening. Tell us, what did this bring up for you? Have you noticed the quiet bids in your own life? What do your own patterns of turning away look like? We read every single one.
We are building a community here, people who think about relationships differently, not as a milestone to reach, but as a profoundly human experience to understand.
You are not alone in this, and we are genuinely glad you're here at Leone Patterns.
Same pace, same questions. See you then.